She wasn't a threat. She was a message. A warning wrapped in soft blue skin, bound to a spiked wheel in the middle of a dust-choked courtyard, left for the sun to burn and the crowd to mock. Her name was Bianca, a being from a distant star. System, captured, chained, and sentenced not by law but by fear. Earth had changed. War with alien species had left humanity broken, paranoid, and merciless. Executions weren't just punishments anymore. They were performances, but someone watched differently. Shami, a hardened warrior trained to protect Earth from alien invasion, was sent to witness her demise. Yet the moment he locked eyes with Bianca, something ancient stirred inside him, something that defied orders, uniforms, and even blood. Her silence screamed louder than war cries. Her bruises told truths his commanders never had. What began as an execution turned into a revelation. He didn't see a prisoner. He saw a lie. And the first crack in humanity's fear was shaped like a warrior's heart. Because when a human dares to love what the world tells him to hate, the galaxy starts to shift. The sun over Sector 7 burned hotter than usual that day. Heat waves shimmered off scorched steel, and dust clouds rolled across. The remnants of what used to be a thriving industrial zone, it had long since become a spectacle arena, where enemies of Earth were publicly displayed and sentenced. This time, it wasn't a rebel or traitor shackled in the center. It was her, Bianca, stripped of her identity, her technology, her voice. Left, in little more than scraps of alien fabric and surrounded by rusting metal spikes, she stood chained to the executioner's wheel, her arms stretched outward like a cosmic crucifixion. Her skin was the color of frozen dusk, a radiant pale blue hue that made her unmistakably other. Her long silver strands fluttered in the wind like torn banners of a fallen dynasty. The crowd had gathered to watch, to sneer, to celebrate Earth's latest trophy. But Bianca didn't tremble. She stood as if the ropes binding her were made of silk, as if she'd already faced worse, and from the balcony, behind a line of armored guards, Shami stood watching. He wasn't a general. He wasn't royalty. He was a field-hardened warrior, one of the elite tasked with neutralizing extraterrestrial threats before they reached the colonies. To his superiors, he was efficient, obedient, deadly. But today, even through his tinted visor, his stare didn't match his reputation. There was no rage in his gaze, no pride, only curiosity, and something deeper he couldn't name, because the reports didn't match what he was seeing. According to intelligence logs, Bianca was a scout from Ilaria, a planet known for its manipulative diplomats and subtle psychic warfare. The file said she refused to cooperate, that she was caught attempting to infiltrate Earth's command center, that she'd attacked soldiers. None of that showed in her face now. No malice, no fear. Only grace under degradation. Shami's fingers, curled against the hilt of his blade. Not because he was about to draw it, but because he wasn't. He had killed before. He knew what an enemy looked like when captured. This wasn't it. The commander's voice rang out through the comlink. Observe the subject's resistance level during heat exposure. This one dies in 72 hours. Maximum window. No hydration. Let the sun do the justice. Shami remained silent. Bianca's lips didn't move, but her eyes flicked upward and caught his gaze through the shadows of his helmet. There it was. A connection. No words. No sound. Just knowing. It hit him with the force of a warship's engine. She knew who she was, and she knew he didn't belong here. Somewhere in the haze of propaganda, orders, and battle scars, Shami had missed something critical. Something that made this entire execution feel staged. As he turned away from the platform, the wind carried a whisper. No one else heard it, but he did. A single word, like a ghost escaping cracked lips. Help. He paused mid-step, and for the first time in over a decade of loyal service, Shami's heart began to disobey. The executioner's square hadn't seen this many bodies in years. Banners flapped from jagged steel poles, their edges torn by time and war. Families stood on balconies. Soldiers lined the gates. Drones hovered overhead, broadcasting the event across Earth's fractured cities like a festival. But this wasn't a celebration. It was a warning. At the center of the spectacle, she stood bound. Her name was Bianca, alien, captive, displayed. The wheel behind her was ancient in design, spiked, towering, once ceremonial, now brutal. Her arms were stretched wide and tied with bio-rope that glowed faintly with restraining charge. Her silver-blue skin shimmered beneath the punishing sun, dust clinging to her bare shoulders, lashes fluttering but never closing completely. The wind carried her scent, unfamiliar but oddly clean, like ozone before lightning. She made no sound. The crowd called her many things: spy, deceiver, freak, property, but she never answered to any of them. Far from the main stage, Shami leaned against a scorched pillar, arms folded across black exo-armor. The reflection in his visor caught Bianca's figure perfectly. He hadn't removed his helmet in 3 days, yet he felt exposed in her presence, like she could see past the steel, straight into the marrow of his thoughts. He was a warrior, raised in Earth's third militia, trained to end threats before they spread. His hands had ended skirmishes before peace talks even began. He'd never questioned orders, until now. The briefing had claimed she was a scout from Ilaria, a manipulator species who feigned peace while orchestrating silent invasions. They said she was dangerous. Her capture, they claimed, had prevented a mass attack, but none of that fit with what he was seeing now. Her presence wasn't violent. Her eyes, though sharp, lacked hatred. They weren't eyes that sought to conquer. They were eyes that mourned. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't begged. Even now, bound to a death wheel in the desert heat, she carried herself like a queen. A cheer erupted. Someone threw sand at her feet. Another tossed a rotting piece of fruit. It landed beside her toes and rolled to a stop. Still, she didn't flinch. Shami's jaw tightened. "Begin the countdown," barked Commander Rail through the loudspeakers. "Day 1 of purification. Let her rot as a lesson." Bianca's head finally moved, just slightly. Her gaze shifted across the arena and landed, unmistakably, on Shami. His heart jerked. Not out of guilt, but recognition. Something passed between them. Not language, not fear. Something older. Time slowed. He remembered a moment from his childhood. A dream he once had, of floating through stars, reaching out to something he didn't understand. The feeling returned now, standing under the same burning sky, watching a stranger who felt like destiny. A boy behind the railing called out, "Look, the alien's crying." But she wasn't. A single drop traced her cheek and disappeared into the dust. Not a tear, but sweat. Her face remained unreadable. Shami exhaled. He turned, unable to bear it, and began to walk away. But then, he heard it. Soft, fragile, real. "You're not like them." The words weren't spoken. They were felt. A whisper delivered not through ears but into the mind itself. He froze. The crowd hadn't reacted. They hadn't heard it. But he had. He turned slowly. Bianca's lips were still, her eyes half closed. Her head dipped against the wheel. Was it telepathy? A Larian mind speech? Or just a hallucination? Either way, the spell had been cast, and a crack had formed in the armor of his obedience. Barrack's lights flickered overhead as Shami stripped off his battle-worn armor piece by piece. It hit the floor with hollow clinks, metal echoing in a room too quiet for a man at war with himself. He sat alone on the edge of his cot, boots still on, visor clenched in his hand. He hadn't imagined it. He couldn't have. Bianca's voice, if you could call it that, still rang inside his skull like a bell trapped in vacuum. You're not like them. Simple, disarming, impossible. But real. Shami had faced alien threats before. Some snarled in languages unknown. Others shrieked frequencies meant to shatter bones. A few used pheromones or illusion, but never had one, spoken to him without sound, without expression, without permission. Her voice had wrapped around his thoughts like a plea, not a trick. He opened the secure console at the far end of the room and accessed restricted footage from the last 72 hours. The camera angles were wide, unedited, unfiltered. There she was, still on the wheel, still restrained, still composed. He zoomed in, studied her face, not even a twitch of rebellion. No spit, no glare, no outburst, only stillness. Almost like meditation. He clicked deeper into the classified archive, bypassing 3 authorization codes. Bianca's capture logs. Location, crash zone near the old temple basin. No energy weapons recovered. No squad of invaders. Just her. The arresting officer's report was contradictory, claiming she resisted, then surrendered, then said something about seeking parley. Parley? Diplomatic terms weren't used by combatants. They were used by peacekeepers. Shami leaned back, mind racing. He thought of the way she had looked at him, not as prey, not even as prey's equal, but as someone familiar. As if she'd known him before this life, before the ranks, before the armor. A knock at his door jolted him from the screen. "Sergeant Shami," barked a soldier from outside. "Commander wants a word. Now." He rose without answering, wiping the sweat from his brow. As he followed the hall to command, Bianca's eyes haunted every step. The cold, indifferent corridors felt tighter, harsher. No longer home. Inside the briefing room, Commander Rael didn't look up from the table of holograms. "You were observed at the execution square longer than necessary. I was instructed to witness." "You were instructed to inspire fear," Rael corrected. "Instead, you hesitated." Shami kept his stance firm. There were inconsistencies in her file. Rael finally looked up, lips curled. "That's not your job to question. You're a soldier, not an investigator. She's a Larian, that's all you need." Shami didn't move. Permission to inspect the wreck site she landed in. Rael stared him down, then laughed dryly. "Is this compassion I hear? For that thing?" She didn't resist. She asked for diplomacy. "You heard her?" the commander snapped. Shami hesitated. "No, but I felt something." Rael slammed a fist onto the console. "That's exactly how they get inside you. They don't break walls. They melt convictions. Illyrian women are known for emotional warfare. Sympathy is the first toxin." Shami clenched his jaw. Understood. But he didn't believe a word of it. Back in his quarters, sleep was a stranger. The desert wind howled outside like ghosts circling the base. He stared at the ceiling, counting the shadows, until the weight of his doubt became unbearable. So he moved. He crept out under curfew, silent in dark fatigues, slipping past patrol drones and cameras, heading straight for the square. Bianca was still there, unmoving, her body slack with exhaustion, but her face calm, too calm. He approached her slowly, keeping his voice low. "I'm not like them." "You said that." Her eyes fluttered open. In the dark, they looked silver. "Because you're listening," she whispered aloud this time. "Why me?" "Because you're not afraid to see." His hand reached out and brushed her wrist, gently, testing boundaries, not making promises. The restraints hummed with warning, but she didn't pull back. "I can't break the law for you," he said. "You already broke the silence." They remained there for a moment. Two strangers, enemies by design, allies by instinct. And something ancient stirred between them, not lust, not fantasy. Recognition. As if two souls built in different galaxies were once cut from the same flame. The sun began to rise behind the wheel, and neither of them blinked. The second sunrise over Executioner's Square was crueler than the first. By mid-morning, Bianca's body had slumped forward. Her arms, still bound above her, trembled faintly. The once ethereal shimmer of her skin dulled to a pale frost blue. Her lips cracked, her breathing shallow. The medics were ordered not to interfere. To Earth command, she was still breathing, therefore still a spectacle. Shami stood at the perimeter in civilian gear, his helmet locked away, eyes naked to the world. No one recognized him without the armor. No one questioned his presence. He was just another set of watching eyes, except his gaze wasn't entertained. It was enraged. He'd spent the entire night reviewing archived transmissions from Alarian contact attempts, messages Earth never responded to, peace delegations, science envoys, all flagged as probable misinformation. He saw Bianca's name listed in a transmission meant for Earth's Space Diplomacy Council, offering trade routes and cultural exchange. They never replied. Instead, they shot down her vessel near the old temple ruins. And now, they left her here, to die, for propaganda. He returned that evening, using access codes from his time in command. His presence raised no alarms. He'd memorized every patrol cycle. At the wheel, Bianca barely stirred. "I brought something," he whispered, pulling a hydration capsule from his coat. Carefully, he tilted her chin and placed it beneath her tongue. She didn't resist. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first. "You came back?" she murmured. "I couldn't leave you like this." Bianca let out the faintest laugh, dry and brittle. "You're not what they made you to be." Shami glanced around, pulse quickening. "I read the logs. You were trying to initiate peace. They erased it all. I suspected they would. Why, didn't you resist capture?" "Because sometimes the only way to be heard," she said, "is through suffering." A pause. Then she asked, "Have you ever seen someone chained and still chosen to sit beside them?" Shami lowered himself to the ground beside her wheel, the cold sand biting through his uniform. "I have now." The next day, the unexpected happened. She sang. No words, no lyrics, just tone. Clear, rising notes like flowing glass. It began soft, then climbed into harmonics no human could mimic. The air itself seemed to ripple with sound. Soldiers froze. Civilians went silent. The melody carried sorrow, depth, memory. It wasn't a challenge. It was an elegy. For what was lost. For what was silenced. Command panicked. "They'll think it's mind control," Rail snapped, slamming fists on the operations table. "Mute the square immediately." "She's not attacking," Shami argued. "She's mourning. She's manipulating. She's reminding them she's alive." The argument exploded. Rael accused him of being compromised, emotionally, entangled. Shami didn't deny it. "Couldn't. You're relieved of field access, effective immediately," Rael barked. "One more misstep and you'll be discharged without honor." Shami left without saluting. He had seen enough. The public was divided. Some wanted her execution expedited. Others began to whisper. They'd seen the footage of her song. They couldn't explain why it left their chests aching. Bianca had sung, once, and it was enough to shift the tide. Back in his room, Shami packed a small case, rations, a portable shield emitter, plasma wire, his old stealth cloak. He stared at his own reflection in the mirror, eyes unrecognizable. He wasn't going to save an alien. He was going to save the truth. And in doing so, he knew he might never come back. Midnight cloaked the outpost in absolute silence. Spotlights dimmed and patrol drones retreated for recharge cycles. Storm winds gathered on the horizon, kicking dust into the electric fences that framed Executioner's Square. It was now or never. Shami moved like a phantom through the security breach tunnel, a passage he had once memorized as a soldier, now used as a traitor. His stealth cloak flickered only once, briefly revealing his face beneath the dark hood, eyes hardened not by guilt but by resolve. He had rehearsed the escape 100 times in his head, but this moment pulsed with unsteady adrenaline. Bianca was still on the wheel. 3 days without food. 3 days in the open sun. Her body sagged forward, supported only by the ropes. Her skin bore burns in strange patterns, symbols of cruelty and carelessness combined. And yet, as he approached, her eyelids twitched open. "Am I dreaming?" she whispered, hoarse. "No," he murmured, kneeling at her side. "This is the end of your sentence, or the beginning of yours." Shami gave a ghost of a smile. "I'll take it." He pressed a small emitter to the wheel's base, coated with frequency disruptors. The magnetic lock sputtered, then powered down. The vines uncoiled, releasing her arms. She collapsed forward, but Shami caught her mid-fall, lifting her like she weighed nothing. She gasped against his chest. "You came?" I didn't know how not to. With her wrapped in a shadow cloak and shielded by a pulse nullifier, they slipped across the yard. Every movement had to be precise. A single camera detection meant execution. But Shami had rerouted. Those feeds earlier that night, he had nothing left to lose. The hangar was quiet. Drones parked like sleeping giants in rows, blinking faintly in standby mode. Shami guided her to a hovercraft near the end, one of the older models, untraceable, slow, but silent. Bianca looked around. "You're risking everything." Everything was already broken. As the craft lifted into the dusty air, red alerts lit up across the command center. Rail's voice shrieked through the base-wide comms. "Escape in progress. Sector 4 breach. Traitor confirmed. Shoot on sight." Searchlights roared to life. Shami veered into the canyon path, evading the Y. First rounds of tracer fire. Bianca activated rear shields, though her fingers shook from fatigue. "Hold on," he shouted. A narrow tunnel appeared ahead, and he banked hard. The craft scraped both walls, but emerged intact into the abandoned trench system below the old temple basin. It was sacred ground once. Now it was his last gamble. Drones surged after them, 4, then 6. Too many. "We can't outrun them," Bianca warned. "We're not going to." Shami pulled a detonator from his belt and slammed it against the wall of the craft. She stared at him. "What are you—" "We jump. Now." They leapt as one, the hovercraft diving toward the trench as the explosive lit up behind them, consuming the passage in a burst of smoke and debris. The drone swarm collapsed in a chorus of shattered wings. They landed hard in the sand, coughing, bruised, but alive. For a moment, neither spoke. Bianca looked at him through wind-struck hair. "You should hate me." "I don't," he replied, brushing sand from her cheek. "You don't even know me." Shami met her gaze. "Then tell me who you are." And under the stars, with fire behind them and the future unwritten ahead, Bianca told him, not as an alien, not as a prisoner, but as herself. "I am Bianca of House Narelle. I came to offer peace, not as a soldier, but as a historian. My people believe in legacy, not domination. We wanted to share what we've learned across light centuries. But Earth, it met us with guns, not dialogue." He nodded slowly. "That's not what they told us." "I know." For the first time since the war, Shami felt something rise in his chest that wasn't duty. It wasn't fear either. It was purpose, real and raw. They were no longer just fugitives. They were witnesses to a truth too dangerous to stay buried, and they would carry it forward together. The stars above were no longer stories. They were roots. Shami sat beside Bianca beneath a fractured dome on a hidden outpost orbiting Saturn's third moon. The air here didn't carry sand or smoke. No gunships rumbled in the distance. There were no crowds, No ropes, no orders, only breathing, only recovery. She stood near the edge of the glass, watching the planets drift past like silent giants. A shimmering wrap covered her shoulders, concealing the burns that still faded in patches. Her silver hair had been braided back by her own hands, no longer wind-wild, but royal again. "You're healing fast," Shami said behind her. She turned, her voice softer than the last time he'd heard it. "Alarian bodies respond quickly to truth. Pain slows when freedom returns." He nodded. They'd been here 3 days. In that time, he'd been officially declared dead, his name scrubbed, his record sealed. Earth Command issued no statement. The execution footage had been cut. Public narrative maintained that Bianca had perished on the wheel. They had buried her, in spirit. But she was here, alive. A symbol not of defeat, but defiance. Her people had come. 2 envoys had arrived at the outpost. Not soldiers, not politicians, scholars. They listened as Bianca told her story. No bitterness, no fury, just clarity. They looked at Shami with guarded interest at first, then with cautious respect. After the debriefing, one had said, "You disobeyed your world to protect ours," and Shami had replied, "No, I disobeyed a lie to honor something real." That had been enough. Now, Bianca joined him on the bench. The lights above dimmed as simulated dusk washed across the dome. "I never asked what you believed," she said. He tilted his head. "Before I met you? Before and after." Shami folded, his arms leaning forward. "I believed in orders, in surviving long enough to die with honor, in doing my job well enough that I didn't have to ask why. And now?" He looked at her. "Now I believe in the sound of your voice when you sang. And I believe in that moment you looked at me and didn't see a killer." Bianca smiled. Not the regal kind, not the distant kind, the kind that broke quietly through walls. "I never thought I'd feel this way for a human," she whispered. "You're loud, violent, graceless. But when you listened, Shami, everything changed." He reached out slowly, fingers brushing hers. "I didn't fall in love with an alien," he murmured. "I fell for a voice that wouldn't let me walk away." They sat in silence, hand in hand, as orbit pulled them slowly toward light again. Later, under the diplomatic chamber's arch, Bianca activated a transmitter encoded with Alarian resonance. It would relay across unguarded channels, reaching neutral sectors, rogue Earth satellites, and any station still brave enough to listen. Shami stood beside her as she began. "This is Bianca of House Norel." I was chained in silence, but I did not die. I speak not as a warrior, but as a survivor. Earth is not our enemy. Fear is. And I speak these words with someone once trained to kill me, now standing beside me as proof that peace can grow from the edge of a blade. She paused, her eyes scanning the lens. "If you hear this, human, alien, hybrid, wanderer, know this. War does not define you. Love does. And I loved someone enough to forgive his people. He loved me enough to betray his leaders. That is the story that must live now." Shami touched her back as she closed the broadcast. They didn't need applause, they just needed the truth to echo. Months later, Earth finally blinked. A small faction within the militia, scientists and journalists, uncovered corrupted files, Bianca's diplomatic logs, her unarmed landing, her healing protocols. The public heard her voice in leaked transmissions. The wheel had not silenced her, it had made her unforgettable. No warships came to Ilaria, no apologies either. But the silence broke, and that was enough. In the years that followed, Shami and Bianca worked together, building what neither of their worlds could alone. A network of understanding, a web of light that spanned systems. She once said, "I sang to survive, but I stayed to love. And he replied, I fought for orders, but I live for you. No more chains, no more lies, only a story that changed everything. Not because it ended in victory, but because it began with belief.